Welcome to the Voices of Young People podcast, brought to you by Springtide Research Institute. In each episode, we hear directly from young people as they respond to our research and share about the issues impacting their lives. As sociologists and researchers, we see a new story unfolding for young people, one that moves beyond traditional institutional boundaries and requires careful attention to the inner and outer lives of emerging generations. At the intersection of being and becoming, it's the Voices of Young People.
I think accountability brings out, I would say, the best in myself, just because I have that idea that if I do something, I'm going to have to report it to my higher ups as well as the people who are dependent on me. So I have this responsibility to prove to myself and to the people that I work with that I am capable of getting these things done and getting them done well.
Hey folks, welcome back to the Voices of Young People podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Josh Packer, the Executive Director of Springtide Research Institute. And for this entire second season, we're focusing on our newest book, Meaning Making, the 8 Values That Drive America's Newest Generations. Each episode, we cover a chapter in the book, which is tied directly to a particular value that our research has really uncovered and has shown to be particularly salient and important for younger generations in ways that maybe wasn't so obvious to older generations, or wasn't so important throughout all of their lives as it is now. And today we've got with us Bill, and with Bill we're going to talk about this really important value of accountability. Bill, thank you so much for being here with us.
No problem at all. Thank you for having me.
So Bill, before we get jumping into this, maybe you can just sort of let our listeners know a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yes, my name is Bill. I am 21 years old. I live in Colorado, Denver during the summer break, winter break, and then Greeley, Colorado during the school year. I am a business administration major with the University of Colorado, and I have an emphasis in computer information systems. And outside of school, I mostly work for the Home Depot, or I mostly work with some of my outside of work organizations.
Yeah, that's great. You, Bill, we talked a little bit before the show started. You're a very busy person, which I don't know if everybody understands that. I mean, as a college professor, obviously I'm around young people a lot, and I feel like I often have this insight into how busy they are that other people don't quite understand. How do you manage to do all of that in like one, regular 24-hour day?
Primarily the focus is just getting done what needs to be done that specific day. Long-term projects tend to be spread out throughout multiple days, so there's never really focus on one day where, I'm definitely doing this one thing. For example, with schoolwork, if I'm told, okay, an assignment is due by so-and-so day, then I'll work on that throughout the day. But if my job assigns me a shift from, just as a hypothetical, let's say 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. or something like that, then I know, okay, I'll need to deal with that immediately. So just kind of balancing out my schedule like that is how I would say I manage my time.
Well, it's no small feat, and I like it's a testament to how dedicated I think many young people are. That they even try to balance all of those things. So anyway, I find it very impressive, and not just with you, but with other people that I see, and it's a trick to try and get all that stuff to sort of line up together so that you don't let anybody down. And that brings us right to this value that we're discussing today about accountability. And before we start, I want to share some of our research findings with the audience here. But before we get into that, maybe if you could just talk a little bit about what accountability means to you, because this is sort of counterintuitive. I mean, when older people, when I talk to sort of quote unquote adults out in the world, they wouldn't necessarily associate accountability as being really important to young people. And yet, we hear from you and from other people that it is really important. So maybe tell us a little bit about what you think about accountability and why it's so important.
To me, accountability is more of a timeless factor. The idea that whether you're young, old, somewhere in the middle, that no matter what you do, you're going to be responsible to either yourself for the work that you do or to others for the work that you do for them. For myself, with the esports organization that I'm a part of with the university, my performance is incredibly important to me because it's something I genuinely care about. Whereas if I'm at work, then my performance to my bosses is extremely important because it's what they hired me to do and it's what they pay me to do. So no matter where I am, what I'm doing, accountability is an extremely important factor.
I think the prevailing sentiment from older people might be that young folks just want to basically do whatever they want. Like I would basically just, that they think that young people basically just want permission to, and not just permission, but also affirmation for whatever decisions they make in their lives, whether they're good decisions or bad decisions or healthy ones or unhealthy ones. But this notion of accountability as being really important sort of turns that on its head. And in fact, in the survey research we did for this, the results were sort of overwhelming. In fact, so 45% of young people say that if a leader isn't accountable in an organization, then they feel like they can't trust the entire organization. And then 65% say that accountability is an important quality of a strong leader. So, this notion that like young people are sort of identifying the core of an organization as being, really intrinsically tied up with notions of accountability. Tell me a little bit about where you've seen that show up in your life. Are there particular leaders or organizations that you think have really embodied this notion of accountability for you?
In terms of accountability, I would like to think that the most important one that comes to mind would be with the esports organization that I mentioned earlier. Just the idea that no matter what we do, there's the accountability to, for example, myself, I'm a team captain for the Rocket League B team for the university. So I am being held accountable by the two players that are under my watch, because if I'm not doing the work to put in to get matches set up or to get practices set up or to have reviews analyzed or things like that, then of course these two people are going to be let down. And of course there's the people above me, like my coordinator, who expects me to report to him anything that's happening there. So I'm being held accountable by a leader as well.
And and that's not something that you're running away from. It's something that you lean into.
Yes.
That you don't mind being held accountable to things?
Not at all. I think accountability brings out, I would say, the best in myself, just because I have that idea that if I do something, I'm going to have to report it to my higher ups as well as the people who are dependent on me. So I have this responsibility to prove to myself and to the people that I work with that I am capable of getting these things done and getting them done well.
Yeah, so it's really interesting to hear you say that. So you're not alone. So this was the most surprising thing for me about the research for this chapter was that 75. So aside from the leadership statistics that I just shared, 75% of young people indicated that accountability was among the most important aspects of any organization that they would want to be a part of, not just for themselves but for others. So that's like an overwhelming percentage of people that would share something similar to what you just shared. And I'm curious about this, like this bringing out the best in you, because is it more like, oh, I don't really like accountability, but it's like taking my medicine and I know it's good for me because it brings out the best? Or is it like something that you actively embrace because you're, desiring all the time to be better?
In my mind, it's something I actively embrace due to the fact that when I say it brings out the best in me, I mean that if I'm under the impression that no matter what I do, it's not going to make a difference, I'm not going to be held accountable, I'm not going to be confronted about, oh, this happened, so how are you handling this? So in my mind, accountability is the idea that if I'm doing something, I want to improve on it, I want to better it, and that way I'm able to report better results and I'm able to improve myself as well as morale or performance of those around me, and mostly use it as a collective function to bring everyone around me up as well as myself.
That's a great point, to bring everybody else up around you as well as yourself. So I know that you've got aspirations. You mentioned at the beginning you've got a business major, so I presume you're going into the for-profit world. We've got a lot of listeners to this podcast that are going to be wondering, okay, so young people want to be held accountable. So, I know how to hold young people accountable. I set their output goals for them depending on what my business is. And then I just sort of yell at them until they get there. But I don't think that that's probably the most productive way to do it. And we lay out some of these in the chapter about like what accountability actually looks like. When you think about, as you move into the business world as a young person, how can an organization foster a culture of accountability that would make you excited to be a part of it?
A culture of accountability that I would be excited about. See, with the esports organization, it's a little bit easier because, it's not a job. We're not expected
Right.
to put out a certain level. We're not being paid to do all these things. It's more for the sake that we love what we do. But in a working environment, it's a very different atmosphere in the sense that there are a set level of expectations. There are a set level of production, for lack of a better word. And these things are basically the line of either you're considered to do extremely well in your boss's eyes and you're showing that you're responsible and you're able to be held accountable for the performance of your position, or you're not proving yourself and you're not showing that you're responsible enough for this. And the accountability is to then be reprimanded for things like that when you're being told, I'm not performing well, so I need to improve on this, and my boss is going to make sure that I do this. So going into the... Oh, sorry.
No, go for it. Please finish.
So going into the business environment, I would definitely want to focus on the fact that accountability isn't something that's supposed to be held over somebody's head and basically told either you do this or you get thrown on the chopping block and we'll throw your butt to the curb or something like that. It's more the idea that you're able to communicate with your higher ups, you're able to communicate with those you're working with, and you're able to show your responsibility and show that you genuinely are performing, which I think accountability is extremely helpful with.
Yeah, so I think that's a really important sort of turning it on its head, that it's not necessarily this external force of people saying like, here are your goals, and like you said, you either meet them or you're out, but it's this reporting back up and having this open dialogue around, what's best for the company, what's best for my growth, and how can we both get there in a way that benefits both the boss and the employee. You have a lot of roles. You've obviously worked in a number of places. You mentioned Home Depot. Are there particular bosses that you can think of that have helped to sort of, because that's sort of a unique understanding of accountability. So I'm just wondering if there are like models for that, or sort of where that understanding of accountability comes from in your life.
In my life, it's primarily values through being raised with my family. Fortunately, they've instilled accountability from a very young age. But in terms of working environment, like where I currently work, and yes, I work for the lumber department at Home Depot. So if you ever see the crazy guy driving around on the forklift at freaking whatever speed, yeah, that's probably me, and I'm sorry. But some of the people that instill accountability within the working environment definitely would be my bosses. I've had a few different supervisors over 2.5 years. Things have changed. My original boss is long gone, and I wish nothing but the best for him. But he basically wanted to instill in us very early on that no matter what we do, we would have to report to him. We would have to tell him what we're doing. We would have to prove that we genuinely are performing. So these people were extremely helpful in instilling these values in me, as well as just making sure that no matter what happens, my performance is up to the level that they expect.
So that brings, like, in the chapter, one of the things that we talk about, that we write about it, that the research shows pretty consistently, is that clear roles and expectations are really one of the first keys to establishing accountability in a structure. And it sounds like that's what you had, or have rather, at your job. It's like you know what's obviously expected of you. You know how it's going to be measured. You know what your role is. And that seems like it makes it easier then to be accountable. I've been in places where I've had bosses that expected productivity, quote unquote, but like it wasn't always clear what was mine to do and what was somebody else's to do. And I felt like that always felt to me very capricious, or random and like unfair. And that clarity of roles seems to take care of a lot of that and make it easier to establish this notion of like, yeah, we can be accountable and hold each other to high standards without it seeming, like I'm just randomly coming down on you at various times.
Of course. Obviously, one of the main things is making sure that with responsibility comes the idea that the expectations are very clearly stated, that this is what someone is supposed to be doing, or this is what someone is supposed to be working on or paying attention towards, or anything like that. It's extremely important to make sure that there are clearly defined roles as well as tasks for each and every person, whether it be somebody who's at for a way to describe it, the bottom of the ladder, where it's just the floor, coming in as their first level of the job and being told, okay, here are the responsibilities that you have, here are the jobs that you need to do. Those need to be clearly defined in order to have the most optimal experience. And that ranges all the way up to the top of the ladder, the guy that makes whatever crazy amount of money to take all the responsibility of running the whole company. He has a clear set of expectations as well as jobs that he needs to perform just the same as anyone else.
Bill, the last thing I want to touch on here before we wrap this up is sort of like, the values in any context are always these things that sort of can be tempting to, they're sort of optional. Like, you can cut corners with them. And so I imagine, like in your esports league, maybe it's like, well, maybe I don't want to go the extra mile to do that thing. And then somebody holds you accountable for it. Or if you're, working at the Home Depot, like maybe there's a way that you could appear to have done the job, but not necessarily do it all the way or something like that. And of course, we all nobody's perfect, and we all get it wrong sometimes, and we all slack off on occasions when even if we're not necessarily proud of it. What is it, do you think, that sort of like gives you this, and people of your generation, even this notion that like, I want to be held accountable consistently over and over again, instead of just sliding into this like, well, I don't know, I'll meet the bare minimum, but it's not like I, really want to go the extra mile or do this extra thing that would push everybody forward.
Yeah, and I can definitely understand the point you're making with Home Depot and with the esports organization. There's definitely the possibility of, you can come in and, just to use a personal example, there have been some days where I'll be functioning off 2 hours of sleep and a can of liquid caffeine, and that's what's going to have to get me through the day. I believe the Air Force says hello. Sorry about that. I live a little bit away from an Air Force base, but they tend to have a habit of flying over my house. Don't know why. And so to go back to my topic, so with Home Depot and with esports, there's always the possibility of, if something's not going right or if something just doesn't seem like it can be done, to make it look like I did the work, but in reality, it's not actually doing it or not doing it completely to the standards that my higher-ups expect of me. But there's always that motivation to improve myself and to want to better myself, whether it be improving my overall performance with esports. Right now I'm in the top 5% of the world, but my overall goal is to reach the highest rank in the game, which is the top 0.1%, which to me sounds crazy, but the fact that I've gotten this far in the span of 5 years, it's giving me at least a little bit of hope. And with my job performance, if in my mind, if I don't perform to this, it's either going to do one of two things. Either it's going to make my bosses and my superiors upset, and they're going to see that the performance isn't where they want, or it's going to create more work for me later on. Because one of the things I'll see a lot of people do is they'll try to avoid showing any accountability. They'll try to pawn work off to the next guy, or they'll try to make it as easy as possible for themselves, which, funny enough, actually makes it more difficult for them rather than just taking the task head on immediately.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And as you're talking, Bill, it makes me think that there's room for leaders here to understand this, like a term that is somewhat popular right now, but the gamification of the workplace. As you're like describing the esports league, the thing that we say in the chapter is that for accountability, you need clear roles and expectations, well-defined goals and purpose, and opportunities for regular and meaningful feedback. And you've got all of those right there in the esports league. I mean, it's maybe even clearer than it would be in the workplace, but I think managers and bosses can do things in the workplace. Or, if you're running, like let's say you're trying to hold people to a level of accountability, say in a church or a volunteer group, that you can do some of these things that provide for the regular and meaningful feedback that you get just through wins and losses, right, into your ranking, and provide that well-defined goal and purpose to sort of create the same environment or culture that you get in that space, but in other spaces as well. Because I think the lesson here being that young people won't run away from that. They're happy to have that level of accountability for the goals that they're trying to reach for themselves.
Mm-hmm. And I genuinely do hope that with accountability is something that flourishes with newer generations, whether it be the generation that's currently graduating from college and having to have their commencement ceremonies online or whatever it is that they do, to all the way down to the kids that are just starting elementary school that are going to be the generation ahead of us. I genuinely do hope that accountability is something that flourishes under these people, because no matter what, accountability is something that's going to be important, and especially now more than ever, it's important to show personal responsibility and accountability and show that someone is able to, whether it be an individual or whether it be a group of people as a whole, are able to stand behind their values and are able to perform to the best of their abilities and improve both themselves and the people and environment around them in the process.
It's so well put and so well said, Bill. So I just want to say thank you for taking the time today to talk to us about this out of your obviously very busy schedule. I really appreciate it. It's been a fantastic talk.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate being here. It was a pleasure to speak to you.
Visit springtideresearch.org to hear more voices of young people and purchase our latest book, Meaning Making: 8 Values That Drive America's Newest Generations. Sign up for our newsletter and be the first to learn about our upcoming research, including the 2020 State of Religion and Young People report coming out this fall. Today's show was produced by Marta Abuaji and TJ Birnbaum, with original music by high school student Christian Unthank. Special thanks to our guest today and all the young people whose perspectives and insights make our research possible. Remember to find us on social media at We Are Springtide and share your own story with the hashtag #ShowUpForYoungPeople. Thanks for listening.